The first time Adanna met Mama Nnenna, it was a rainy Friday afternoon in Lagos, the kind of afternoon when the sky looked like it had run out of patience. Thick clouds pressed low, and thunder rolled like distant drums as Adanna sat by the window, staring at the clock for the third time in 10 minutes. She was exhausted, mentally, emotionally, and physically. Her job as a customer service manager demanded long hours and endless calls, and balancing that with caring for her 6-year-old son Tobi had become nearly impossible. Over the past year, 3 different house helps had come and gone. One disappeared without notice. Another left after 2 weeks, complaining that Tobi talked too much. The last one had been caught stealing small amounts of money from Adanna's purse. So when Sister Florence from church recommended someone God-fearing, patient, and experienced, Adanna didn't hesitate. She was desperate. The knock came just as the rain began to pour harder. Adanna rose, smoothing her damp palms against her skirt. When she opened the door, the woman standing there was older than she'd expected, perhaps in her late 50s. She was short, with kind eyes that seemed to have seen too much and lips curved in a permanent, polite smile. "Good afternoon, Ma," the woman said softly. "I am Nnenna. Sister Florence sent me." Her voice was calm, low, almost soothing. She wore a simple wrapper and blouse, and beside her was a small, old suitcase and a wooden box with a metal clasp. Adanna ushered her in, grateful to escape the rain. "Ah, thank you, Mama Nnenna," Adanna said. "You're welcome. Please come in." The older woman stepped inside, glancing around the living room, not with judgment but curiosity. She placed the box carefully on the floor before sitting down on the edge of the sofa. "I hope the journey wasn't too stressful," Adanna asked, handing her a towel. Mama Nnenna smiled faintly. "The road is never smooth, but it always leads where it must." Adanna chuckled lightly, unsure whether that was meant to be deep or simply poetic. After a brief discussion, salary, responsibilities, daily routine, Adanna decided to hire her on the spot. Something about the woman radiated calm, a kind of quiet assurance that Adanna hadn't realized she needed. That evening after dinner, Adanna watched in surprise as Mama Nnenna tidied the kitchen without being told. Every utensil had a place. Every surface shone. Even the smell of the stew seemed richer, warmer. Tobi, who was usually shy around strangers, had taken to her immediately. By bedtime, he was sitting beside her on the couch, giggling at her stories. When Adanna peeked into his room later, she saw him already fast asleep, a small miracle. For the first time in a long time, the house felt settled, peaceful. But peace has its own strange silence. The first few days went smoothly. The house gleamed, meals were ready on time, and Tobi seemed happier. Adanna even began sleeping earlier. But by the end of the first week, little things began to feel off. It started with the humming. Whoa. Almost like the whisper of a flute through wind. It came at night when the rest of the world was asleep. From the kitchen, faintly, a woman's voice, humming an unfamiliar tune. Adanna woke up the first night she heard it, confused. She checked the clock, 2:17 a.m. The sound floated through the hallway, delicate yet strangely haunting. She got out of bed and tiptoed toward the kitchen. The light was on. Through the crack of the door, she saw Mama Nnenna washing a pot. Her lips moved as she hummed, a melody that didn't sound like anything Adanna had ever heard. "Everything all right, Mama?" Adanna asked, stepping in. The older woman turned, surprised but calm. "Ah, madam, you're awake. I couldn't sleep, so I decided to tidy up. Sorry if I disturbed you." Adanna smiled awkwardly. "No, it's fine. I just heard singing." Mama Nnenna nodded, drying her hands. "Just an old lullaby from my village. We used to sing it for the children to keep bad dreams away." Her tone was light, but something in her eyes made Adanna pause. A flicker, almost like pain or memory. "Well," Adanna said after a moment, "don't tire yourself out too much. Good night." "Good night, madam." The next morning, Tobi came to the breakfast table humming the same tune. Adanna froze mid-bite. Tobi, where did you learn that song? I shrugged. Mama taught me. She said it keeps monsters away. Adanna glanced toward the kitchen, where Mama Nnenna was stirring the pap on the stove. Her movements were slow, deliberate, graceful, almost like she was following an invisible rhythm. Adanna told herself it was harmless. Kids picked up things easily. Maybe it was just a cultural lullaby, nothing strange. But still, something about the melody clung to her mind all day. At work, she caught herself humming it unconsciously. That night when she tried to sleep, she could almost hear it again, faint like the walls were breathing with the sound. Days turned into weeks. The routine settled deeper. Adanna began to depend on Mama Nnenna completely. She handled everything: meals, laundry, Tobi's school prep, even the groceries. And she never complained. But small, strange things continued to happen. One evening, Adanna came home early and found Tobi and Mama Nnenna sitting on the floor, drawing with chalk. They were sketching symbols, circles and lines like some sort of pattern. "Tobi," Adanna called, half amused. "What are you two up to?" The boy grinned. "Mama said we're making sun drawings to bring good luck." Mama Nnenna smiled without looking up. "In my village, we believe the sun listens when children draw its face." Adanna laughed awkwardly. "Ah, okay. Just make sure you clean the floor when you're done." That night, she found faint traces of those chalk marks near the back door. She washed them off, but couldn't shake the feeling that the symbols weren't random. The following weekend, Adanna's mother came visiting. A retired teacher and staunch believer in prayer, she took one look at Mama Nnenna and whispered later, "That woman's eyes are too deep. She's not ordinary." Adanna frowned. "Mummy, please. Not everyone who looks serious is dangerous." Her mother sighed. "Just be careful, my daughter. The world is deep." Adanna laughed it off. Her mother was always suspicious of strangers. But that night the humming returned, louder this time. The same old tune, flowing through the walls like mist. Adanna sat up in bed, heart beating fast. Something urged her to check on Tobi. She stepped into the hallway. The house was dark except for a thin strip of light coming from her son's room. As she got closer, she realized the door was slightly open, and the humming was coming from inside. She froze. Slowly, she pushed the door open wider. Inside, Tobi was fast asleep, his small hand resting peacefully on the blanket. Mama Nnenna stood by the window, the moonlight outlining her figure. Her eyes were closed, lips moving gently with the tune. When she noticed Adanna, she stopped humming. "Madam," she said softly, "the child sleeps deeply when I sing. You should rest too." Adanna wanted to ask questions. So many questions, but her throat felt dry. She simply nodded. "All right. Thank you, Mama. Good night." As she turned to leave, she glanced once more at the wooden box beside the woman's feet. It was open just a crack, enough for her to notice a faint, sweet smell like herbs and smoke. She didn't ask. Not yet. But that night, as she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Adanna knew something had shifted in her home. The house was peaceful, yes, but it was no longer hers alone. And in the distance, the faintest echo of that lullaby floated once more, soft as a sigh. The morning after the humming incident, Adanna woke with a dull headache and the strange feeling that she hadn't really slept at all. The memory of what she'd seen, Mama Nnenna by Tobi's window, humming softly under the moonlight, still lingered in her mind. At breakfast, the house smelled of fried plantain and eggs. Tobi sat humming the same lullaby between mouthfuls, swinging his legs under the chair. Adanna cleared her throat. "Tobi, you really like that song, don't you?" "Yes, Mummy," he said, smiling. "Mama says it keeps me safe. She said it's a secret song." Adanna forced a smile. "Oh, and what does it mean?" Tobi shrugged. "I don't know. But Mama said I don't have to understand, only to remember it." That uneasy feeling tightened in her chest again. She turned toward the kitchen, where Mama Nnenna was rinsing dishes, humming the same tune under her breath. Later, as she helped wipe the counter, Adanna tried to sound casual. Mama, that song you always sing, what's it called? Mama Nnenna looked up with a faint, knowing smile. Ah, madam, it's just an old lullaby from my village. My mother sang it to us when we were small. It helps children sleep peacefully. Her tone was simple, but her eyes carried a depth that made Adanna's questions fade. She nodded slowly, pretending to accept the answer. Yet all day, that tune replayed in her head, like the house itself had memorized it. Over the next few weeks, Adanna noticed that Tobi had become unusually attached to Mama Nnenna. He followed her everywhere, to the kitchen, to the backyard, even when she washed clothes outside. He began calling her Mama, something Adanna tried to correct at first but eventually gave up on. At dinner one evening, Adanna noticed he wouldn't touch his food until Mama Nnenna had served hers first. Tobi, eat your rice before it gets cold, Adanna urged. He shook his head stubbornly. I'm waiting for Mama. The older woman laughed softly, sitting beside him. Ah, leave him, madam. Children like routine. Adanna smiled tightly. I suppose so. But a strange ache sat in her chest, a mother's quiet fear of losing her child's attention to someone else. The next week, Tobi's teacher called from school. Mrs. Okoro, I just wanted to check in. Has Tobi been all right lately? Yes, he's fine, Adanna replied. Why? The teacher hesitated. He's been a bit quiet in class, withdrawn. And he's been drawing these symbols. What kind of symbols? Well, circles, lines, shapes that look like spirals. He says they're from a song. Adanna's heart skipped. A song? Yes, he hums it sometimes during art. We can't quite place the tune. Sounds old. Adanna thanked the teacher and hung up slowly. That night, when Tobi returned from school, she checked his notebook. There they were, faint charcoal drawings of circles, each surrounded by smaller marks. It looked random at first, but something about the repetition unnerved her. She asked gently, Tobi, where did you learn to draw these? He looked up innocently. Mama taught me. She said they're sun circles. They make the light stay in our house. Adanna tried to smile, but her hands trembled slightly. Later that evening when she was cleaning, she found one of those same symbols drawn faintly in charcoal behind the kitchen door. Half erased but unmistakable. She stared at it for a long time, the air in the kitchen suddenly heavy. She called out, Mama, did you draw something here? From the backyard came the calm reply. Ah, no, madam. Maybe Tobi was playing. Adanna said nothing more. But from that moment, she began noticing other little things. A chill that passed through the living room whenever the wind blew, whispers that sounded almost like sighs through the walls, and that same lullaby echoing faintly when she passed the corridor at night. Then came the night of the storm. It started with a flash, lightning cutting through the sky, followed by thunder that shook the windows. Rain pounded the roof, and the lights flickered twice before dying completely. Ah, not again, Adanna groaned, searching for the flashlight. The generator refused to start, no matter how many times she tried. Tobi had already fallen asleep, curled up in his blanket. She lit 2 candles and placed them in the sitting room, their orange glow flickering on the walls. The house was quiet, except for the wind and the sound of rain. She walked toward the kitchen to fetch another candle, but stopped abruptly at the doorway. There, in the center of the room, sat Mama Nnenna, cross-legged on the floor, her eyes closed. Her lips moved soundlessly, whispering in that same strange dialect. The flickering candlelight made her shadow dance across the walls, long and wavering. For a moment, Adanna couldn't move. Mama, she whispered. The older woman didn't respond. Her eyes remained closed, her hands resting on her knees. The whispering grew slightly louder, rhythmic, deliberate, almost like a prayer. And then, without warning, the lights came back on. The hum of electricity filled the silence. When Adanna blinked, Mama Nnenna was on her feet, calmly wiping the counter. Ah, thank God the light is back, she said, as though nothing had happened. Adanna forced a nervous laugh. I didn't know you were here. I couldn't sleep, Mama Nnenna said simply, picking up the candle. The storm reminds me of home. Adanna just nodded and left the kitchen, her mind racing. She couldn't decide whether she'd truly seen what she thought she had, or if her imagination was feeding on fear. That night, sleep didn't come easily. When it finally did, it brought with it a dream so vivid she could still feel the earth beneath her feet. She found herself standing in a vast forest, the trees tall and ancient, their leaves whispering like voices. The ground was red earth, warm under her bare feet. The air smelled of rain and smoke. In the distance, she saw a circle of women dressed in white, standing beneath the full moon. They were singing, no, humming that same lullaby. The tune swirled through the trees like wind, wrapping around her heart in both comfort and fear. And there, in the center of the circle, stood Mama Nnenna. Her eyes glowed softly, like fading embers in a fire. Her lips moved with the song, and when she turned to Adanna, she smiled. Calm, gentle, almost sorrowful. Adanna tried to call out to her, but no sound came. The forest began to fade, the song echoing until it became a single whisper. When she woke, her pillow was damp with sweat. The clock read 3:03 a.m. The house was silent. But just as she was about to close her eyes again, she heard it, faintly from somewhere deep within the walls, that same haunting lullaby, soft and slow, as if the house itself remembered every note. By the time dawn came, Adanna was restless. The dream of the forest had clung to her like mist, so real that even brushing her teeth that morning felt like doing it in a memory instead of reality. Mama Nnenna was already awake as usual, humming softly as she swept the living room. Tobi sat nearby, eating breakfast and grinning at her stories. "Did you sleep well, madam?" Mama asked kindly when she noticed Adanna. Adanna hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Yes, I think so." She didn't mention the dream. She didn't mention the whispering walls or how she woke twice in the night convinced someone was standing by her door. Instead, she nodded and went about her morning. But deep inside, unease brewed like a slow-moving storm. That weekend, Adanna visited her best friend, Chioma, who lived just a few streets away. Chioma was the kind of friend who could make anyone feel better, loud, funny, and honest to a fault. They sat in her cozy living room, sipping zobo and catching up on work, family, and life. Eventually, Adanna leaned closer and lowered her voice. "Chioma, have you ever heard of people using songs or drawings to protect a house?" Chioma frowned. Like spiritual stuff." "Sort of," Adanna said. "My house help sings this old lullaby every night. My son hums it too. And he's been drawing these strange circles. She says it's just from her village, but you don't believe her," Chioma finished for her. Adanna nodded slowly. Chioma sighed, stirring her drink. "You know, sometimes these older women still use traditional protection charms. It's not always evil, my sister. Could just be old village methods. Herbs, songs, prayers, that kind of thing." "Maybe," Adanna said. "But why not tell me first? Why keep it secret?" Chioma shrugged. "Because people like you will overthink it," she teased gently. "You Lagos people always assume everything old is dark. Relax. If your son is safe and happy, maybe she's just protecting him in her own way." Adanna tried to smile, but her heart wasn't convinced. Protection or not, secrets had a way of making her uneasy. 2 days later, her curiosity finally overcame her fear. That afternoon, Mama Nnenna took Tobi to the barber's shop. The house was unusually quiet. Rain clouds gathered again outside, thick and heavy. Adanna stood at her bedroom window, staring toward the small corridor that led to the help's quarters. Her eyes kept drifting toward that door. She told herself she was only checking to make sure everything was fine. But deep down she knew it was more than that. She needed answers. Taking a deep breath, she walked down the corridor and turned the doorknob. The room was unlocked. Inside, everything was spotless. Bed neatly laid, clothes folded with care, floor swept clean. The only thing that stood out was that wooden box sitting quietly under the small table, the same one Mama Nnenna had brought when she first arrived. It looked old, carved from dark wood, with faint patterns etched into its lid. The metal clasp was slightly rusted. Adanna hesitated. Her conscience whispered, "Leave it alone." But her curiosity whispered louder. She knelt, her hands trembling slightly, and lifted the box onto the bed. The wood was cool under her fingers. Slowly, she undid the clasp and opened it. Inside lay a small collection of odd, carefully arranged items. A bundle of dried herbs tied together with palm fiber. A piece of white chalk worn smooth from use. A brown feather bound with a thread of red yarn. And a folded square of faded fabric, with Tobi's name written neatly across it in black ink. For a moment the world tilted. Her breath caught in her throat. Tobi's name. She unfolded it carefully. The writing was precise, deliberate, not scrawled like a note, but almost ceremonial. The edges of the cloth were darkened, as though it had once been burned lightly around the sides. A faint scent of herbs and smoke rose from the box, mixed with something older, something she couldn't quite place. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She quickly refolded the cloth and returned everything exactly as she'd found it. She closed the lid, slid the box back under the table, and stepped away as if it might burn her. For the rest of the day, she tried to act normal. When Mama Nnenna and Tobi returned, she greeted them with a smile, forcing her voice steady. But her eyes betrayed her every time they met the older woman's. And perhaps Mama Nnenna noticed. That evening as they ate dinner, Adanna caught her looking, not directly, but with a faint, almost knowing expression. There was no accusation in her face, no anger. Just calm understanding, like someone who already knew what had happened. "Madam," she said softly as she cleared the dishes, "you seem troubled tonight. Is all well?" Adanna's throat tightened. "Yes. I'm just tired from work." Mama Nnenna nodded slowly. Rest is good. When the heart is noisy, it is better to let it sleep before it speaks." The words sent a shiver down Adanna's spine. That night, after putting Tobi to bed, Adanna sat alone in the living room with the lights dimmed. Rain tapped against the windows. She couldn't stop thinking about that box, about the fabric with her son's name on it. Was it protection like Chioma had said? Or something else entirely? Her phone buzzed suddenly. It was her mother. "Adanna, my daughter," came the old woman's voice, serious and urgent. "Are you alone?" Adanna frowned. "Yes, Mummy. What's wrong?" "I had a dream," her mother said quietly. "A woman was in your house. She was standing by your son's bed, singing. The song was strange. I woke up shaking. Be careful, my child." Adanna's heart pounded. "Mummy, it's probably nothing." "I said be careful," her mother interrupted, voice sharp with fear. "Not everyone who smiles means you well." The line went silent. Adanna sat frozen, her hands cold. For the first time, the peace she'd once felt in her house turned into something else entirely. A stillness too deep, too deliberate. That night, even the humming didn't come. The silence was heavier than sound. And in that silence, for the very first time, Adanna felt true fear inside her own home. That night, Adanna couldn't sleep. Every creak of the ceiling, every whisper of the curtains brushing the wall made her heart race faster. The wooden box haunted her thoughts, the feather, the herbs, the cloth with her son's name on it. And Mama Nnenna's calm smile from dinner kept replaying in her mind, that knowing look she couldn't forget. By 2 a.m. she gave up pretending. She got out of bed, her mind made up. The corridor felt colder than usual. The faint hum of the refrigerator echoed like distant thunder. When she reached the small guest room, she paused at the door and knocked softly. No answer. She hesitated, then turned the handle and stepped inside. Mama Nnenna was awake, sitting on the edge of her bed with her shawl around her shoulders. Her eyes lifted slowly, calm as still water. "Madam," she said quietly, "I knew you would come." Adanna froze. You knew." Mama nodded. "Your spirit has been restless since you opened the box." Adanna's pulse jumped. "So you do know I opened it." The older woman sighed and gestured for her to sit. I felt it the moment you touched it. Adanna stayed standing, her arms crossed. What are you hiding, Mama? What were those things? Why is my son's name written on a piece of cloth in your box? Mama Nnenna looked down at her hands for a long time before she spoke. Madam, you shouldn't have opened that box, she said softly. It was for your son's protection. Adanna frowned. Protection from what? From you. The woman smiled faintly, sadness in her eyes. No, child. From those who see what they should not. She reached for her small Bible beside the bed and ran her hand over its cover. Your son is special, madam. Born under a rare mark. A star that glows brighter than most. Such children attract attention, both good and bad. They are open doors in this world. Sometimes when they dream, the wind listens. Adanna felt her knees weaken. You're saying, my son is cursed? No, Mama said firmly. He is gifted. But gifts draw envy. They also draw shadows. Adanna shook her head, trying to find reason in the madness. Mama, please. This sounds like superstition. I don't believe in these things. I know, the woman said quietly. But belief doesn't change truth. When I first saw him, I knew what he carried. That is why I came. Adanna's eyes filled with confusion and fear. Who sent you then? Sister Florence. Mama Nnenna gave a faint smile. No, the wind sent me. The same wind that whispers his song. Silence filled the room. The air felt thick, heavy like the pause before thunder. Finally Adanna whispered, You're saying you're not a witch? Mama chuckled softly, a weary sound. A witch? No, madam. I'm a keeper. I watch over children who carry light, so the dark does not reach them. It is an old calling, one few of us still remember. She looked up, her eyes glistening with something that might have been sorrow. That song you hear, it is not a spell. It is a covering. Prayer. It is older than our language. Adanna didn't know what to say. Everything clicked in her mind. The peace that had settled in her home, the sudden improvement in Tobi's health, the stability she had almost taken for granted. But still, part of her resisted. If that's true, she said slowly, why hide it? Why scare me like this? Mama Nnenna sighed. Because not everyone is ready for what they cannot see. The following days passed like a blur. Adanna found herself watching the woman more closely. Her quiet prayers before dawn, her gentle care for Tobi, the way the boy's laughter always seemed to echo differently when she was around, as if the house itself joined in. But something deeper stirred beneath it all. Tobi's drawings began to change again. This time, when Adanna flipped through his school sketchbook, she didn't see circles or symbols. She saw a woman standing between a small boy and a wall of dark shapes, like silhouettes trying to reach him. The woman was always holding a red string in her hand. When she asked about it, Tobi just smiled and said, That's Mama. She's holding the rope so the shadows can't come near. That night, he woke up crying from a dream, clutching his blanket and whispering. The dark ones came again, but Mama pushed them away. Adanna's skin prickled. She started praying more. The fear she tried to suppress began to gnaw at her from inside. Finally, one afternoon she made up her mind. When Mama returned from the market, Adanna met her at the door. Mama, I think it's time you went back to your village. The older woman stopped in her tracks, the bag of tomatoes still in her hand. Why, madam? You've done enough, Adanna said, forcing her voice steady. I appreciate everything you've done, but I need my space now. Mama Nnenna's gaze held hers for a long, silent moment. Then she nodded slowly. As you wish. But that night the house changed. The air grew heavier. The moment the sun set, the lights began to flicker. The clock in the living room stopped ticking. The smell of spoiled food drifted from the kitchen, though everything had been cooked fresh that morning. Adanna woke at midnight to the sound of the front door creaking open, though she had locked it herself. When she rushed to Tobi's room, she found him burning with fever. His skin was hot, his breath shallow. He muttered in his sleep, Mama, don't let them in. Panic seized her. She shook him gently. Tobi. Wake up. Please. Nothing. She stumbled out of the room calling, Mama Nnenna, please, come quickly. The woman appeared almost instantly, as though she had been waiting. Her shawl hung loosely around her shoulders, her face calm but her eyes fierce with focus. She knelt beside the boy, placing her palm on his forehead. Then she looked up at Adanna, tears gathering in her eyes. Madam, she whispered, I told you not to send me away. Adanna's voice broke. What's happening to him? The light is pulling away from him, she said softly. The bond one wove is unraveling. Let me finish what I started. Or you'll lose him. Adanna's chest tightened. Finish what, Mama? Mama Nnenna looked at her son's face, then back at her. The protection. The song must be completed. I cannot leave yet. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind outside and the faint hum of electricity returning. Adanna sank to her knees beside them, trembling. She didn't know what to believe anymore, whether the woman before her was truly a guardian or something else entirely. But when Tobi's hand twitched weakly toward Mama Nnenna, as though reaching for her even in his sleep, Adanna knew one thing for certain. Whatever truth this woman carried, it was bound to her son's life in ways she no longer understood. She nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. Then do what you must, she whispered. Mama Nnenna bowed her head in gratitude, murmuring softly in that same old tongue. And as the night deepened, the house seemed to breathe again, as though something unseen had finally begun to listen. The moon hung full and bright above the quiet compound. Mama Nnenna moved slowly in the backyard, lighting small candles around Tobi as he slept peacefully on a mat. Her soft chanting floated through the air, ancient, gentle, and strangely beautiful. Adanna stood by the doorway, torn between fear and faith. The air shimmered faintly, and just as the final candle flickered, a sudden gust of wind blew them all out. Mama Nnenna fell to her knees, whispering one last word before she collapsed. Adanna ran to her side, but the woman only smiled faintly and whispered, He is safe now. By morning she was gone. Only the small wooden box remained, with a folded note inside. He is safe now. My work here is done. When the wind hums that song, know I am watching. Years later, Adanna sits before her camera, her voice calm but full of emotion as she shares her story. She ends her narration with the same soft lullaby, the one that once filled her house with mystery, now filled with peace. I never knew my house help was a witch, she says quietly. But maybe she was something even greater.